you, Peter. Thanks for trying to be bilingual there, Brother Latham. That's not bad. We could work on it, though. All right, church, I'm going to be a little bold today, just a little bold today in my sermon. Could be much bolder, believe me, but, this story, along with every other story where Jesus is in conflict with a Jewish religious leader, I want to suggest it must be carefully interpreted, like the rest of the scriptures, of course, but in this case, to avoid a reading that adds fuel to the pervasive anti-Semitism among Christians interpreters. Reading Jesus as an opponent to Judaism is not only a distortion of the gospel stories, but also a distortion of the faith of Jesus, I believe, who remained a faithful and observing Jew for his entire life. Jesus may interpret the Torah differently than the particular religious leaders he debates with, but his interpretive lens is adopted from the Hebrew prophets. Jesus even tends to directly quote the prophets in situations like this. I believe the New Testament becomes clear with an understanding that the Hebrew prophets were not foreshadows of Jesus, but that Jesus was rather heavily influenced by the Jewish prophetic tradition and based his ministry and teachings on them. Jesus's prophetic interpretations of the Torah would have also been shared by other rabbis as well. Feminist theologian Barbara Reed also cautions us of a sexist reading of this story that casts a woman in the role of victim and the male Jesus as the one who brings healing. Reed argues, I quote, if the Christian reader identifies with the male Jesus, then Christian identity is established as male and woman believers are either left out or have to read it as if they were male. If Christian women identify with the woman as victim, the story can reinforce a dependency on males for well-being, unquote. You with me? We must reject the common patriarchal narrative where cis men are cast as the fixers and cis women, femmes, and trans people are cast as those in need of fixing. The suffering of cis women, femmes, and trans people, I believe, is often prolonged while time is wasted in endless debates between cis men over the methods and minutiae of liberation. I wonder how long this debate among the men in the synagogue actually lasted. And how many men got involved before Jesus joined in and said, "You hypocrites." History is filled with the privileged delaying liberation by placing it on a timetable that is convenient for them. The Lucan synagogue leaders regulation of the woman's healing, of course, reminds me of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s observation of the behavior of the white moderate. Who is more devoted to order than to justice, he says. And I continue to quote MLK, quote, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, unquote. Famous quote, yes? Dr. King's assessment was partly a response to a letter he had received from a white man in Texas saying, I quote, all Christians know that the black people will receive equal rights eventually, but it is possible that you are in too great a religious hurry. The teachers of Christ take time to come to earth, unquote.
Got it.
We also acknowledge the reality that the sentiment of the white moderate, as Dr. King names it, is not limited to white people, as minoritized groups can turn, and I've seen this, to centrism as an extension of respectability politics. This is why I believe that Jesus is never moderate. And Jesus chooses sides of those of us who have to suffer longer because of lengthy timetable of moderates. From their timetable, some people assumed that the woman would wait another day. While there's Luke in Jesus' timetable insists that the woman has already waited how long? 18 years. And the time for healing and liberation is what? Now. So I constantly have to ask myself these questions. It's a whole list of them. You ready? And these are questions that I always have in front of me in my desk. In what ways am I regulating people's liberation, I ask myself. In what ways am I prolonging suffering but confining liberation to an itinerary that is convenient for me? Who are the people in my community who suffer the most when I put off liberation to a more convenient season? In what ways have I suffered from this procrastination? What are the fears I have to make that make me hold off on liberation? What would I lose? My privilege as a U.S. citizen, straight, heterosexual man. My comfort? These are my questions for myself. Because the thing is this, Luke's synagogue leader wasn't against Jesus' healing. He approves of healing, but just not in the way Jesus did it. You feel me? He agreed with his goal, but not his methods. I have witnessed how we can be guilty of a similar hypocrisy when we vocally support causes but condemn the methods of organizers for not doing things the way we believe they should be done. I want what you want, but not like that. It's a comment that organizers and activists are very familiar with. I have seen this way too often, and I'm not just talking about the church, I'm talking about amongst organizers and activists. There is an ignorance of the urgency for liberations in comments like this, though. In his essay, The Pitfalls of Liberalism, civil rights leader Kwame Ture critiques the liberal who wants to bring about change which will not in any way endanger his position. Told you I was going to be a little bold, I'm sorry. Just a little bold. Tory describes liberals telling the oppressed, while things have been bad in the past, somehow they can become good in the future without restructuring society at all. I think many of you know that I became a Christian through conversion at 20 years old. And in my first years of being a Christian, I was taught to believe that Jesus could return any second and snatch up all the good Christians to heaven in a glorious rapture. This led to many of us having great anxiety about our future, hoping that we could experience a fulfilling life before Jesus comes back. We hope we could at least get married or have children or travel or buy a house and accomplish everything we aim for before Jesus comes back. But I don't believe in the rapture anymore. But a form of their desire to hold out Jesus until I live a fulfilling life has stuck with me throughout the years. It just comes up in other ways now. It comes up when I ever put off the work of liberation until I can participate more conveniently. It comes up when I desire to achieve enough success and comfort to make my life easy before serving the needs of the people in my community. I wrestle with this procrastination within myself whenever I have an opportunity to practice mutual aid or to build relationships with local organizations. I wrestle, but I think I must wrestle with this procrastination as a community as well. So I am with this. Our desire to put off the work of liberation to another day is challenged by Luke's reminder that liberation has already been put off for centuries. Amen? God calls us to participate in liberation and healing at the moment we're in right now. Amen. The floor is yours. Help yourself up to the mic, please, even if it's a small group.